to Cabinet meeting this evening. Let's start off with any apologies for absence. I know that Councillor Alan Brittis is attending online. Yeah, perfect. Any declarations of pecuniary interest? None declared. And the minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of July and the special meeting held on the 31st of August. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, we'll start with the first substantive item on the agenda. That's the Manton Civic Pride Fund investing in neighbourhoods using neighbourhood seal funding. Now ask Councillor Stringer to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. So the next two items are about the main funding opportunities that we as a council are using to invest in one of our key priorities, which is ensuring civic pride. So I was honoured to be made responsible for supporting our civic pride agenda, and I've spent the past few months meeting with a range of individuals and organisations to making our borough a great place to be proud of. So the first item asks approval to launch the Civic Pride Investing in Neighbourhoods Fund. So this will distribute some of the money that we as a council receive from developers when they build in our borough. These funds are the community infrastructure levy, and historically the neighbourhood SIL has been used to fund an exciting range of projects that really matter to local people, be that funding improvements at organisations like Clean City Farm and Polka Theatre, to investing in improvements to local shopping parades and parks. So as outlined in the paper, we're now going to be asking people to come forward with project ideas that fulfil this council's objectives. And namely, those objectives are nurturing civic pride, building a sustainable future, and creating a borough of sport. So this investing in neighbourhoods funding is aimed at larger projects requiring at least £20,000 of funding. Colleagues may remember that previously we kept some funding aside for smaller projects and individual wards through the ward allocation scheme. We are reviewing that process currently and its successes and challenges, and we'll be developing further proposals for that pot of money in the coming weeks. Following, hopefully, Cabinet approval, we hope to open the funding application in the coming weeks, and we'll be get back to Cabinet with shortlisted projects early next year. So I'd like to thank the officers for their work on this, particularly Tim Catley, who's sat here, and their colleagues for their work in developing this, and doing a lot of work behind the scenes to launch, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. And we really look forward to seeing what brilliant project ideas we receive and hope that we're able to fund some excellent initiatives that we can all be proud of. Thank you, Chair. So I move the recommendations on the board.
Thank you, Councillor Stringer. And are there any officers that would like to make a contribution? Okay. All right. Cabinet members, any comments, questions, statements? Councillor Cooper Marbia.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just wanted to say thanks to Councillor Stringer for the report. This is a fund that I've been used widely in my ward, Collieswood, previously. And with my sport portfolio, I'm looking forward to advertising it a bit more and hope that we'll be able to benefit from that to improve, to actually do what we want to do with sport. So yeah, looking forward to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, if there's no more comments or questions, we are asked to agree recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So moving on to item 5, Merton Civic Pride Fund supporting the voluntary and community sector and the commissioning requirements. And over to you, Councillor Stringer.
Me again, so thank you. So this item is also about some of the critical funding that the council provides. And this time it's the funding we use to support our thriving voluntary and community sector. And we want to support the sector not in and of itself, but so they provide high quality services for our residents, and particularly for the most vulnerable and those in need. So this pillar of the Civic Pride Fund builds on work that we began 4 years ago when the council pooled and aligned grant funding into a single strategic partner programme. And that was in response to feedback from the sector. So that work led to better relationships and better partnership working with our charities, which paved the way for really speedy responses on challenges like the COVID pandemic, supporting Ukrainian refugees, and most recently, with the living crisis. So I'd like to thank all the organisations that have worked with us on those and other issues over the past few years. So the set of funding being discussed will cover multi-year grants from 2023 to 2026. So it's really important that we get this right. So we worked hard to co-design the funding perspectives with both charities and also wider partners, ensuring that they've helped shape the perspectives. So having brought together several funding streams into one pot and having worked so collaboratively with the sector, we hope to achieve some really excellent outcomes through this strategic approach. We've also increased the amount of funding available, showing our willingness to invest in services for our residents and our confidence in the sector. So therefore, we're looking to invest over £5 million, that's nearly 1.7 million a year, for information, advice and preventative support services for our community. This is an increase of 35% overall in the funding. One thing that we've heard strongly, both in this consultation process and also in our work with communities in response to the Black Lives Matter movement, is that some of our smaller organisations, which often tend to be led by and work for ethnic minority communities, struggle to access some of our funding streams in the past. So there are several ways that we've addressed this in the work being presented here. So first, we've set aside £50,000 a year to be given to Merton Giving, to award grants with the aim of supporting and developing Merton small volunteer and community-led organisations. Secondly, we've tasked Merton Connected with provided targeting bid writing support to smaller organisations who might need their help with applying for the broader fund. And finally, we're actively encouraging organisations to collaborate and submit joint bids. So we hope that this will enable smaller specialist groups to be part of bids led by large charities. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted the timetables very similar to the other Civic Pride funds, and that's by design. So we're working to ensure that the communications are aligned, that a wide range of groups are aware of the funding available and clear on the aims and eligibility of both funds. So I'd like to really thank Amanda Roberts, Heather Begg, John Dimmer and all their colleagues for their work on this, and a particular thank you to the organisations who took part in the collaborative working group process and gave us their time. And I'd also like to thank the independent chair of that group, Simon Breeze, from Sutton Community Action. But thank you, and support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Stringley. I believe the like to comment? That's it. Thank you very much. And just before I hand over to Cabinet members for questions and statements, I just want to say that Merton has always had that strong track record with partnership working with our voluntary sector and community sector, and it's great that they have been involved in shaping and making of this new fund to help that important sector in our borough. They've done a tremendous amount during COVID and with the cost of living crisis that many of our residents are facing. So I commend the work of the Cabinet member, but also with officers for introducing that element to this funding. Are there any comments or questions from other Cabinet members?
Can I just add, sorry, Chair, really appreciate the fact that you have set aside a pot of money for smaller organizations, because I have heard over the years where organizations don't receive funding, and they think maybe because there are these larger organizations who know how to fill in the form and know how to do the application process a bit more. But by doing this, it shows that we are listening, but then also we really reaching out and making sure that the funding is reaching out to every sector of our community. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Okay. We are being asked to agree recommendations 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so moving on to the cost of living support fund. Councillor Chris.
Yes, thank you, Leader. As everyone here knows, this administration is focused on helping residents get through the cost of living crisis as we head into the autumn. We know that things are going to get very tough, and we are doing everything we can to help. This paper sets out our proposed approach to distributing the first half of the £2 million cost of living emergency fund that we established shortly after the election, as well as the latest tranche of household support fund monies that we have been allocated by the government. We propose to allocate the vast majority of this money to helping residents right now as we head into a difficult winter, and we suggest doing this in the following ways. £854,000 will go towards direct grants of £60 cash payments to residents who are in receipt of council tax support. £630,000 will be used to fund free school meal vouchers during school holidays between October and March next year, including next year's Easter holidays. A further £100,000 will be used for an application-based referral scheme, which will be administered by the Wimbledon Guild. and £100,000 will be used to support Sustainable Merton's community fridge network and the Food Poverty Action Plan. But as well as helping residents now, we also want to help residents tackle increased bills in a sustainable, long-term way. And so we're also proposing to allocate £400,000 to initiatives that reduce heating costs, such as home energy efficiency visits and energy efficient white goods and heating appliances for low-income households. A further £200,000 to cover the cost of 2 additional debt advisors from the Citizens Advice Bureau over the next 2 years. And finally, £100,000 to go towards key partners in the voluntary sector who provide direct assistance to residents. So this comprehensive package of support gives direct assistance to residents right now, but also invests in sustainable solutions that help residents lower their bills over the long term too. In January, we will review the effectiveness of all of these measures, and will then be able to allocate the remaining £1 million from the emergency fund to provide further support. We can all agree this is yet another example of this caring administration stepping up and helping residents. So I recommend the report and recommendations A to H to colleagues, and hope we can all support them so we can get on to giving residents the help they need.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. And would the lead director have anything to add?
As it's just to confirm that the government has sent out draft allocations, which actually match the amount that we've set aside in the report for the household support grant. Recognising that the scheme actually starts sort of at the beginning of October, they're a bit late coming out with their allocations. So hopefully when they confirm what the final ones will be, that should be the same amount. But it'll be interesting to see if there's anything in the emergency budget to give additional further support. If there is, then we have some conversations with the cabinet lead to then see if there needs to be changes or it waits until we review in January.
Thank you. To cabinet members for questions, statement. Councillor Judge.
Well, can I compliment the cabinet member, yourself, leader, and officers for putting forward this comprehensive package, which I think amounts to significantly more than £2 million in total. It's just the sort of thing we need to do in exercising our local leadership to assist people in what is going to be a very difficult and for many a desperate time over the months to come. And so congratulations, but we must sustain our effort if we can, probably next year as well.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I must reiterate what was just said, the cabinet member and all involved in this really great work. And in fact, it's not about short term, but we're also looking long term, which is very important. Otherwise, we will just be throwing money away if we don't do that. So I certainly recommend what we've done.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you very much for the report. I think it's great. Everyone worked on it. Just one question. When you were talking about, I think it's fabulous to do the £15 vouchers for those who received free school meals. If they go to the holiday and activity and food clubs, how will you manage that? Will you give that to the club, or will they still get that on top? Because it means they can have 2 good meals a day.
So this is the school meal vouchers.
Yes, but in the holidays, some of the children will go to, because they're going to be extended, hopefully. And if they're going, they'll get a hot meal served. So will the families still get it? Because then they can give them a nice meal in the evening.
We've got Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'll ask the officer to come in.
And families who'd like to come in.
So I believe the way this has been handled in the past, in the past holidays, where there has been that the vouchers have been distributed as well as attendance to have program. So it's, as you say, that's kind of 2
Councillor McKay.
Chair, I'm pleased to see a range of support here, but there was a question that came up last night at the council meeting about providing warm places for people. Is there within this set of proposals something that we could use if it were necessary at some later stage, or could we look at that in the review that's just that's going to be taking place in January.
I mean, that may well be something that we look at in the review in January. I believe there's also some further relevant policy around providing such places in the borough. Perhaps correct.
And also we're actually looking to see what we can do with this building rate regarding energy costs, but making sure that we don't put at risk warm buildings where we identify those particular items.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further speakers were asked to agree recommendations A to H. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on to living wage employer accreditation, item 7, Councillor Christie.
Thank you, Leader. We want to ensure that everyone in Merton is paid a real living wage, and for Merton to be a living wage borough. That starts with us as a council achieving accreditation from the Living Wage Foundation as a living wage employer. Merton has paid all of its direct staff and agency workers the London living wage since 2013. However, to achieve accreditation from the foundation, we also need to demonstrate that we have a plan to implement the real living wage or the London living wage across all our in-scope contracts and contractors. So this paper sets out the timeline for developing that plan, working with the Living Wage Foundation, and therefore achieving accreditation from the foundation by the end of January 2023. For all our in-scope contracts, excluding care homes, which will need to be addressed at a later date, the anticipated additional cost to the council over the next 5 years would be 7.5 million, and this is being built into our medium-term financial strategy. But I'm sure we can agree that this will be money well spent as we work towards everybody who lives and works in Merton being paid a decent wage. We're also, I'm pleased to say, proposing to appoint a living wage champion to work with me and officers to drive this project forward, and recommend that that be Councillor Billy Hayes. So we can all agree there's an important and very positive step by the administration. I'm proud to be bringing this report to colleagues for you to consider, and hope you'll support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Christie.
So just to add that there was an announcement today about increases in the living wage rates. So that the real living wage rate has gone up by 10.1%, and that the London living wage has gone up by 8.2%. And we've also brought forward the increase from April to the 1st of November. So really good news for the staff and employees of contracts, but we will then need to work through to see if there's any additional impact on the budget. But that's really good news. And also we had said that we would look to update the provision set aside in the impacts and what that means. So we will look to do that as we move down the country.
Thank you. Just before I open it up, I think it is key just to draw attention that since 2013 that the council, as Councillor Christie alluded to, has adopted the London living wage for all staff and agency workers. And since the new administration has come in, we've been committed to seeing through that and actually really going for that ambition of accreditation for the living wage as a living wage employer. And I'd like to thank officers and also the cabinet member for his drive to really spearhead and see this through. And I'm sure once we get to being an accredited employer, we will really see Councillor Hayes really tackle the rest of the outside of the civic centre, looking at the borough, looking at the businesses that can also help deliver that overall aspiration of Merton being a London living wage borough. So thank you to everybody that has contributed to this report and the accreditation that we hope to see by the end of January. Are there any statements or questions from cabinet members? Councillor,
But again, I think it's really important. We're an exemplar on these issues of social justice. And this is a very important issue. It goes to the heart of the wages coming into households and to families. We have to set an example, and this is what we're doing. So again, it's a good thing.
thank you, Councillor McKay.
Leader, I think it's really important to thank the cabinet member for this and the officers that have been involved. My own organisation, I've just left after 20 years, that we introduced the real living wage as a small voluntary sector organisation some years ago, and we've found it's been very, very good for our staff. And I think the other thing to say is that there are more and more organisations, including our colleagues. I was attending a meeting yesterday with NHS colleagues, and some of the local hospitals have agreed to do that. And I think we should be joining them in that venture, because we should recognise the link between poverty and poor health. And if we can do something to address that, then that's a really important step for us to take. So I thank you for supporting this initiative.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to thank Councillor Christie for involving one of the other councillors. Sorry, who isn't even on the cabinet, but he has a background in which will actually help us to work, because he's been with the unions. And so if we work together, it can only be for the best.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. So we are being asked to agree recommendations A to E. Are they agreed?
Agree.
Perfect. Okay. So we're moving on to the references from Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny Panel. We should have noted earlier that apologies have been received from the Scrutiny Chair, who is unable to attend because he's participating in the Planning Committee, which unfortunately clashes with this meeting. But I will ask Councillor Judge to speak on the reference from the Sustainable Communities Panel in relation to the housing enforcement and tenants champions.
Well, Leader, we are an administration that is taking a new direction in housing, and that includes housing enforcement, and it includes assisting people in the private rented sector who unfortunately have the experience of bad landlords. Now, we're invited in this report to note the work of the Scrutiny Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny Panel when it met on the 22nd of February. And it came forward with a series of recommendations. And what I think we will be doing as a Cabinet is to consider those recommendations over the next few months and bring back a report with a comprehensive and detailed response to those recommendations. So recommendation A is to review the full-time equivalent support to the housing enforcement team with the purpose of recruiting a minimum of one additional officer. So clearly there is a resource implication here, and we have to assess the current performance and capacity of that team and whether we need that additional officer. Recommendation B is following confirmation from officers that the one-year trial and other conditions of the original council motion have been met. Cabinet should decide to either resource or discontinue the tenants champion scheme. Lady, you asked me to be the tenants champion since the election in May, and certainly I dealt with a number of tenants since then. A lot of them are on repair issues, and it is a difficult task, and it's certainly time consuming. So we need to consider how we can properly resource this function in the future. I don't anticipate we'll be envisaging discontinuing the tenants champion role, because it's so important that we assist tenants, not only actually of private sector landlords, but of public sector landlords as well. And there are no doubt lessons that we can learn from other authorities across the country. But we also have the substantial resource of the leadership of local ward councillors. And I have to say of yourself, Leader, since you have led a series of visits to local housing estates since May, knocking on doors, sampling tenants' experience of their landlord, and where things have been difficult or bad, picking up on those and following them through. So this is very important work. We will consider how best we can support it and bring back, I think, a report later this autumn. Recommendation at C is by the end of 2022 to review our housing enforcement policy to enable clarity of scope, escalation and resolution for officers' responsibility to inspect and audit repairs reported by tenants of registered providers, housing associations audited in the borough, operating in the borough. And that again, we will do and bring it back. And then there's recommendation E to identify and report back to scrutiny options to engage the local housing sector for the purposes of Merton's house building and housing enforcement policies. And recommendation F to commission an internal and external communication strategy that will promote the aims and objectives of our enforcement policies, both social and private tenants, in an accessible and engaging format, and streamline reporting of risks due to poor housing conditions, targets and share learnings with appropriate stakeholders to reduce common issues experienced by tenants and increase confidence. Very important that we have that communications policy, that looking at our website, possibly there is room for improvement there. And it may be accompanied by the work that we are about to initiate of partnering more closely and more regularly housing association in a range of issues, but particularly the circumstances in which their tenants are live or are obliged to live, in some cases due to the failure of repairs and other landlord functions. This is very important work and we intend to take it forward with determination. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Judge. As a cabinet, we will note the reference and, as Councillor Judge had mentioned, respond within 2 months. I'll move to item 9 and ask Councillor Lyons to speak on this reference.
Chair, just want to thank the panel for their work and for having us at scrutiny when we discussed all issues and things, flight tipping, and just talk about some of the work we're doing to try and tackle the flight tippers. I think we've already been doing some work in this area, looking at things like bringing Garth Road closer to our residents. I think as we encourage people to come out of their cars, we have to review and change how we do services like Garth Road, because not everyone can drive there. So we are looking at things like a kind of mobile version of Garth Road. We've had things like community skips in the past that have kind of been abused or created flight tipping hotspots in themselves. So we're looking at a way of bringing Garth Road closer to people that doesn't exacerbate the issue of flight tipping. So we're quite happy to accept this recommendation and to continue our work in bringing Garth Road closer to the residents.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Councillor Lyons. Like with the last item, we will note the reference and respond within 2 months. Thank you. Moving on to the award of contract for the arboriculture services. I'm going to ask Councillor Lyons to introduce the item.
So this is really just about managing the trees that we currently have. It's all well and good us having great tree planting targets. We're on target to reach 3,000 trees planted this year. We're hitting our commitment to plant a tree for every child in the Queen's Jubilee year. So we're doing everything we can in that space. But ultimately, if we don't manage the trees we currently have, we won't maintain our canopy. So this is around having an extra resource to help us to do that and have a proper maintenance schedule. The company that we have been recommended to award the contract to is a company that were served in the borough during Storm Eunice and was very responsive and works really well with the borough. But they've also put together an offer around things like social values, so giving apprenticeships to people not in education or training, and to do community work with local schools and to try and mitigate their carbon footprint. So it's a good package around, and I think we should accept this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Would the lead director like to comment?
No, at this point.
Okay, thank you very much. And are there any comments or statements from cabinet members?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank councillor Hines for the work that she's doing. I'm sure it's a thankless job in that blighted just continues whatever you're doing. But for what you're planning, I think that's well done. So thank you and all the officers who've helped.
There are some cabinet review recommendations A and B. Do they agree?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So now moving on to the violence against women and girls strategy, councillor Stringer.
Thank you, Jeff. So next, the items about another aspect of civic pride, which is that we want residents to feel safe and be safe in their home. This first item is about tackling violence against women and girls, which is an absolute priority for us. And this item provides an update on some of our work in this area and introduces our updated board violence against women and girls strategy. So as you can see from the update, there's a lot of work going on in this area, some led by us, but often working in partnership with teams from across the council and beyond. But the scourge of violence against women and girls has not gone away. We know there's more that we can and should do. The new strategy outlines our headline priorities, including a renewed focus on both prevention but also catching perpetrators. It's been developed jointly with input from other partners, particularly the Violence Against Women and Girls Board, which is chaired by our Director of Children's Schools and Families, Jane McSherry. I would like to thank her for her work on that. And it was recently scrutinised by the OB Scrutiny Commissioner. I'd like to thank them for their input. We will be developing an action plan, as they put in having a strategy without being clear about how you're going to achieve it. And that action plan will outline how we'll deliver on this. But in the meantime, I'm really pleased to say that we've been pushing forward on several new initiatives, including having secured Safer Streets funding from the Home Office and working towards being white ribbon accredited. So both of these schemes have a focus on working with men and boys, all men and boys, to understand their role in changing attitudes and preventing their violence. So, for example, supporting them to know what to do when they witness their friends saying unacceptable things about women and girls. So anyone here can take a white ribbon pledge, and I urge you to do so. Our leader has kindly signed himself up as an ambassador, which is brilliant leadership. So I'd like to thank the officers involved, particularly Zoe Gallen, who does a sterling job in bringing together a really wide range of partners to work effectively on tackling and preventing violence. And also support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Stringer. And would the lead officer like to comment?
No, councillor Stringer has said it very clearly and have to take questions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ryan.
I just wanted to commend Dr. Stringer and the team for this work. I think it's really refreshing to have a perspective of how do you prevent this from happening in the first place, and how we help men in this position in relation to violence against women and girls. We've got a responsibility to tackle this, not just our burden as women to live in a world where this is acceptable. So I just really commend the work and that we're taking this approach. So thank you very much.
Councillor Cooper-Marvin.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I'd just like to also thank the councillor and the officers for the work on this. I think it's one of the areas that may be difficult to see results, but I think we just need to be persistent. And it's also great that you're working in partnership, because it's not one person's responsibility. I think with having partnership, everyone really involved and publicizing what we're doing, I think it will take us some way to achieving our goals. So thank you very much.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. This is part of my portfolio. So I was really keen and happy to see what is being done. So thank you, Councillor Stringer. And it's good to see the wide range of people that we'll be working with, including MOPA. And because I work in the church, and I see some of these things, and we really don't want it to continue. So there are other partners, obviously, in schools, colleges, wherever. And also with Councillor Kim, because she's on the other side of what I'm doing. And so thank you so much to everyone who is dealing with this on behalf of all the people who probably are quite vulnerable. I'm not sure how to deal with this. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fraser. And I'd just like to commend officers and Councillor Stringer on this report, and in particular on securing that additional funding that we were so successful in. I think it speaks volumes about our ambition, but also our commitment to such an important issue that is affecting many people within our society, often the most vulnerable. So thank you. So we as cabinet are to note the update on the work on the gender and agree Merton's ending violence against women and girls strategy. Do we note that? Okay, so moving on to public space protection order, Councillor Stringer.
Thank you. So this is about something that we know is of utmost importance to our residents, which is happening and social behaviour. So we know that Merton is the third safest borough in London in terms of crime, but we know that antisocial behaviour is still of great concern, and that in some cases it is linked to levels of alcohol abuse in the public. Street drinking causes particular issues in some areas of our borough. So there are some tools and levers that other agencies like the police have, and this item is about one of the tools at our disposal as a local authority, so a public space protection order. So we implemented a public space protection order in 2020. And the PSPO is designed to prohibit certain activities in an area. Ours focused on antisocial behaviour related to alcohol consumption. And we focused it on 5 wards because it had to be geographically and focused. Lavender Fields, Graveney, Ravensbury, Fixmarsh and Cricket Green, thereby covering Mitcham Town Centre and surrounding areas. So this was under a new act that replaced the previous control drinking zone legislation. And it means that we as a local authority can fine people for breaching the order when people drinking alcohol are currently more likely to cause social behaviour. So the current PSPO expires in October 2022, so we ran a consultation to get evidence about the current PSPO's impact and residents' views on extending. And then consultation responses are included in the papers. And what we've heard clearly is that people want to extend the current PSPO beyond October. But they also want better enforcement of it, and they want to see if it's relevant to other wards. So this is also the view of the external agencies, the police. Therefore, as well as a recommendation to extend the PSPO in the current 5 wards, we're proposing to run a further consultation, which is a stage we have to undertake. On the proposal to expand it to the whole, effectively tackle problems with drinking. It's important to note that PSPOs are not designed as a purely enforcement tool. Our aim isn't to find lots of people and make lots of money of it who just happen to be drinking in the street. It's very much about making Merton a responsible drinking borough, and it's a preventative tool. So, for example, officers can use the PSPO powers to intervene at an early stage, asking individuals to move on or desist from drinking, and that can prevent things from escalating. They can also encourage people to access support if it's clear that drinking is an addiction. So these steps should be used before it's necessary to escalate. Issues. So we're working on that at the moment. So I'd like to thank the officers and cabinet teams, particularly Alan Good and Katie Saunders, who've been leading on this, and to everyone who responded to the consultation. Thank you very much. And again, I'd like to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Commission, who reviewed the evidence and recommendations recently and endorsed it.
Thank you. Believe us to
I would on this one. The previous PSPO, it wasn't a lot of enforcement. When I use term enforcement, it's not just about, as Councillor said, there's been a real lack of engagement, and I just think that's because they've been other priorities. So this time around, you can be reassured it's going to be done differently. And just to give you an example, between the 30th of August and 2nd of September, our colleagues from Kingdom Enforcement have engaged. So not enforced, engaged 21 times with street drinkers, 16 leaflets around support and if people want to get out of that cycle have been done. And this tool really, the way we're going to do it, and I know I mentioned this to you before, leader, is it's all part of an assertive outreach package. The aim of the game really is no fines, lots of people referred and people out of the cycle. Clearly, there will always be a situation where there are fines. We'll deal with those in case by case basis. But to reassure you, sometimes when PSPOs are brought up and that's considered, and people think, oh, the council's just trying to make money. It's not about making money. If we don't issue any tickets, that will be a success. So, other than that, happy to take questions.
And just before I bring in Councillor, I just want to say that this is a hugely important issue for our residents. The benefits of this working is that our residents are able to enjoy their town centres, their high streets, and really be out there and enjoying their local environments. I think it's incredible to see the partnership involved in this, working with police, working with our organisations like Kingdom, but also the council stepping up to the plate, not only extending the PSPO, but looking to expand it as well. So I think it's a really good report, and I'm really pleased to see the recommendations in there and this approach to resolving some of these issues on our high streets and towns. Councillor Arndt.
Thank you. Yeah, just to echo the leaders, going forward there, I, as a councillor for Bigmar Ward, part of Richmond Town Centre, we've had the PSPO for a while. The thing we've always heard loud and clear from residents is, well, how is this enforced and what changes it actually making? So I'm really pleased to see them thinking around how it will be enforced and how we're monitoring it and seeing the impact of it. Because people just want to be able to enjoy their high streets and feel as safe as it actually is to be there. The only thing I was going to ask is as well, how are we communicating this step change and this change in approach so that residents in these areas can rest assured that the council is changing its approach and is hoping to be more visible and hoping to make these interventions, for people who are suffering from substance abuse.
Shall I go first?
Yeah.
Yes, so we've already started some communication about this increased enforcement, but I think the point for us to go big on the communication would be when we can see it working, and when we can say, this is what we've been doing, and this is the change that we've been given. But my understanding is that when the Kingdom officers are out there on the street, they are also engaging with members of the wider public as well to explain what it is that they're doing. They're not just there to pick up cigarette butts, which we know some residents might know, but they're playing a role in helping to keep people safe. But I hear you that we need to do this work. We need to make sure it's successful, and we need to bring the residents along with us so they see that we've been leading to improvements in their lives.
And just say as well, comms is also visibility, and seeing council staff out and about says 1,000 words on a leaflet. Is the approach I've always taken. And the other part is not to forget, as well as doing that, we want to clean up the trust really quickly and give that impression, because perception is reality. Even if the reality is we are the third safest borough, perception is what people really think about. So it doesn't matter what our stats say about safety, do people feel safe? And that's all part of it. Everybody's heard it's probably broken windows syndrome. So ensuring it's clean, ensuring we're visible, engaging, going in and out of shops and so on is really part of this common strategy.
Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to what everybody has said. I'm from a health background. And so when I think of stopping people smoking, drinking, doing whatever they're doing out there, it's not just about, as you said, it's not a cash cow, as some people tell me. But we do save a lot on the NHS, who is suffering as it is, and who suffers us, because we have to pay the tax for it. But so I'm thinking of an educational way of telling people what they're doing needs to be changed, and don't expect it to be changed overnight anyway. And so I don't know, what are we going to do about that little bit?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of things. I mean, I would have taken a guess here that in our licensing policy, for example, what other councils have done is be really clear about high strength alcohol, which have really impacts on those really vulnerable people, and trying to get that out of our high streets altogether through licensing policy. I think there's lots of work we need to do in schools about substance misuse, because people come from very challenging backgrounds, not all the time, but come from challenging backgrounds, turn to substances because of their problems. And there's a much wider, and I think public health are leading currently on a substance misuse strategy, and I think it goes much wider into early intervention. Absolutely. And the whole aim of trying to get, if we've got Mr. or Mrs. Smith, who is a street drinker, who's on the street every day causing antisocial behaviour, whole aim is to get them out of that environment first, get them into the right support so they can see the damage they're doing to their health, as you say, because it will benefit us all. It will benefit the people that are working, living, shopping in those areas. It will benefit the NHS, benefit the police not having to pick them up every day. So it's a win-win. It's not to say it's not very complex, because these are people are in real deep rooted issues. But if we can help 1 or 2 people a year, that's got to be a success.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones.
May I ask to what degree it can help us during these exceptional periods of hot weather, where we've had groups gathering, particularly in the evening and perhaps sometimes through the night, drinking heavily, causing a lot of noise, disturbing local residents. Is it possible to use these powers and to invite the police to enforce them over that?
Yes,
period?
so the council of the police officers can enforce PSPO. Also, what you can do is another power in the same piece of legislation around dispersal. So if you know that you've got a specific issue in a ward, with a section, it's called section 35 dispersal order, in conjunction with PSPO, it can be really effective. And you forward plan doing that sort of thing, is clearly it's well known. We get feedback from members, we get feedback from members of the public, and it's about us bringing that intelligence together, deciding what the best action plan is. And certainly at other boroughs, that's what we've done before. So if you know, a lot of the feedback we had on this PSPO is that we want it to be borough-wide. We weren't able to do that because of legal reasons, but this time round we'll go out and consult. If that feedback is still the same, once we've got a borough-wide, we won't get what you're probably going to get now is displacement, when we're really effective in dealing with this, you know, dealing with PSPO this time. So actually having something borough-wide will really help with that. But there are, you know, powers of the police, you know, statutory powers that we've already got, as well as PSPO, as well as the dispersal order. You know, if you have them all in the toolbox, then you've got all the options there.
Thank you. Okay, so we are being asked to agree recommendations A and C. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, so I propose to take the next 2 items together. That's the June financial monitoring report and July financial monitoring report. Councillor Christie.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So these are the month 3 and month 4 monitoring reports covering June and July, as you say. Both reports require us to note some adjustments to the capital programme. Month 3 saw us allocating some monies for capital maintenance to a number of schools, following the reprofiling of some money from the pupil referral unit project into next year. And month 4 saw a further reprofiling of capital funding into future years based on project schedule changes or changes in forecasted underspends, and also table tennis tables being installed in parks in the borough, including a park in my ward, which I'm pleased to see. We also need to note that we will need to bring to full council for approval the use of £700,000 for works to the Peel House car park, which I know we're all delighted is now reopened. Both reports show a projected overspend of £5.4 million at the end of this year, which, as in previous months, is largely attributed to lower than anticipated parking income as a result of changes in people's behaviour following the pandemic. And both reports again ask the CMT to look into steps and measures that can be taken to reduce the projected overspend. To move the reports and the recommendations and make call on officers to help answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I suppose you could draw attention within the monthly report, there is also our debt, outstanding debt analysis. And unfortunately, the position is worsened since we last put the update in March. So there's been an increase in our debt over 20 days old, just over 2 million. But work is progressing on that. And some of the challenges we've got with the allocation of SIL monies is that small developers are not being forthcoming in paying their SIL. So we are taking action appropriate to recover that as well, because we can't allocate SIL to the projects until we've got the money in. So we are following up on those. Also, just to remind members that the monthly report is going on to the Connected Commission Task Group. So of course, some further scrutiny there as well. So if everybody wants to attend that meeting next month, then you are welcome to do so. And also to flag some news today around, obviously, interest rates went up by 0.5% to 2.25%. So that may have an impact on our investments. So you'll look to see what that will mean for the November monitoring, too soon for October monitoring. And obviously the announcement for the support for energy bills, from October to November for businesses does include local authorities. So we will also work to see what benefit that gives us. It's currently for 6 months, but they've said that they will keep that on reviews for maybe further extension. But they're looking to cap the level and cost of both gas and electricity, which, considering some of the challenges that we've seen with the trading prices of gas and electricity, that means in the past few months should be beneficial to us. But we're going to have some confirmation again for probably November.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from cabinet members? Okay, so I'll take them in turn. The June financial monitoring report, we've been asked to agree recommendations A to C. Are they agreed?
Agreed.
And the July report, cabinet to agree recommendations A to C. They agreed.
Agreed.
Perfect. Well, brilliant. That brings a close to our business today. Thank you, everybody, for attending.